What's up, guys, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Jibreel Talks Comics. Now, we're going to keep it light. We're going to keep it loose. We're not going to get too professional here. Basically, the idea is I read a lot of comics, and I wanted to create something so we could talk about comics a little bit more. It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough at first. I'm still figuring out a lot of things. Don't judge the set too crazy. Is it trash? We'll figure it out over time. But, be patient with me. If you guys like it over time, maybe I'll clip it out, put it on TikTok if you like TikTok. We're going to be on audio services, so we'll be on Spotify, give it a little bit. We'll be on Apple. And we're going to figure this out. Maybe do some live streams if you guys like it. Maybe have some guests if you guys have anybody in mind that you want me to talk to. Or if you're somebody who would like to talk to me, hit me up and let me know if you'd like to be on the show. But we're going to figure things out, be patient, and we're just going to go into it. Right now, we're going to start out with big stories. Then I'm going to get into my pull list for the week. I have a nice little stack here this week of different books that I got. So we're going to go stories, things that I read physically, things that I read digitally, and then we'll wrap up the show in pretty good time. Probably 30, 45 minutes, nothing too crazy. All right, so let's kick it off. First story. SDCC, we're getting a ton of news. The first thing is the Superior Spiderman ongoing with Dan Slott and Mark Bagley. So this is by Zachary Camiglio over there at CBR. So here's a couple little details that I pulled from the story here. For you guys who don't know, back in 2013, we're talking big time era, Dan Slott's doing his thing. We get a crazy storyline where Doc Ock takes over Peter's body, and over time, I think people really came to love the run. I personally loved the run when it came out, and I actually just recently reread it, and I almost actually liked it more this time than kind of as it was coming out initially. It kind of like grown on me a little bit more. But yeah, it was a really transformative kind of thing. Hard sell at first, for sure. I think just on paper, like, hey, Doc Ock taking Peter's body over, like, it seems cruel and weird. And it is a pretty rough thing at times, but it actually kind of lends itself to some really compelling stories. And it seems like they're going to try to bring that back. And it's interesting seeing kind of Dan Slott get this little mini resurgence. So for you guys who are not really paying super close attention to new Spider-Man releases, he also has an ongoing right now with Mark Bagley that is pretty solid. Now, this is an adjectiveless Spider-Man, not to be mistaken with Zeb Wells' The Amazing Spider-Man run that's also happening right now. So it looks like this Superior Spider-Man run is going to work alongside Dan Slott and Mark Bagley's other Spider-Man thing, which is kind of interesting. Same team, two Spider-Man books, obviously different protagonists, but that I wonder if they're going to play with each other or with each other at all. We'll see. This is going to be on sale November 15th, so we're not going to have to wait super long. But obviously it raises a lot of questions, like how is this going to be possible from a narrative sense? Now, obviously after that initial kind of like 2013, 2014 Superior Spider-Man run, Superior Spider-Man has made appearances. I think he was in Spider-Verse, definitely Spider-Geddon, and so they found ways to make it work because those events kind of took place while he controlled Peter's body. But obviously that it's been a while, so it's entirely possible that this is going to be another period piece. They're going to go back to that big time era and maybe just explore more adventures during that time. But I feel like that can only take you so far. So obviously we'll see what Dan ends up wanting to do, but I'm super on board for it, to be honest with you. Loved the original run. Dan Slott, super solid writer, so I have no complaints there. And he was in the original team as well. And I like Mark Bagley's art a lot. I think I have a little bit of a Mark Bagley bias just because I grew up on Ultimate Spider-Man. So I'm kind of down to see whatever he wants to do. And now I also would like to add a note. This is in addition to a one-shot Superior Spider-Man Returns #1, and Ryan Stegman's coming back for that one. So all you Superior Spider-Man fans of the original run are going to get a little bit of homage there with the Ryan Stegman return. So I'm super stoked about all of this, to be honest with you. We'll see if it lives up. It might, fall short a little bit. Who knows? But I'm just glad to get some more Superior Spider-Man. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. It's like my top 3 favorite characters. I got Spider-Man, the X-Men, obviously it's not one character, and Wonder Woman. So, I'm always down for any more of those things. We can move on to the next story, all right? More SDCC things. All three of these stories that I have for this episode are from SDCC, just so you know. It's a big event happening right now, and we're getting a ton of news. And so I kind of trimmed down to stories that were kind of interesting to me. So Marvel teases the new X-Men post-Fall of X. This is by Brian Cronin over there at CBR. So basically, Marvel releases a trailer, and it says, "Who are the new X-Men?" Now, naturally, anybody who's been a fan of the X-Men for a while or have done their homework in the past, immediately you see that font. One of two things you could think. A lot of people thought of like original 60s logo. The more common, I think, immediate analog you would go to is like Age of Apocalypse. Now, that is very interesting because naturally, when they announce a new X-Men related thing, it can go into one of two camps. Either it's kind of like a throwback piece. I'm thinking X-23, Extreme X-Men, the Storm ongoing right now. You get these kind of minis that kind of harken back to a former era of X-Men. So they're in continuity in the way that they're canon, but they're not relevant to the current Krakoa era. But this one, because they keep referencing the Fall of X, obviously this puts this relevant to what's happening in Krakoa right now, which I think is super interesting, especially when you consider that like Genesis has made her reappearance. For anybody who's read Before the Fall, I think it was Heralds of Apocalypse. You get a whole bunch of Apocalypse, Amenth related stuff, and Genesis is returning, and she's a super relevant player in X-Men Red for all you guys who are reading that. Shout out to Al Ewing. And so this kind of leaves Apocalypse in an interesting spot where everybody's going to ask, like, how is he going to be relevant into X-Men going forward? How is he going to make his reappearance? Because again, right now he has not, I think, crossed paths with anything directly related to the X-Men in Krakoa since him going away years ago at this point. So everybody's kind of wondering, is this going to be his way back in? And kind of hearkening back to an Age of Apocalypse kind of reference is certainly not something I would have predicted. For you guys who don't know, it's a massive event back in the 90s, I believe. I think we're talking like 94, 95, somewhere around there. And Age of Apocalypse is an absolute classic. Obviously, there's been like films based on that, and it had a huge implications in terms of the line at the time where they had all these crazy different titles going around. And so I'm excited to see what that means in a modern context, but I'm really glad that it's not one of those like kind of removed period pieces. Again, shout out to Chris Claremont, love the guy. But I love like kind of current X-Men stuff. Like I think we have so much classic X-Men stuff that I don't really find the need for like new old stuff, to be honest with you. I'm not super nostalgic in that way, and in terms of like I want new Extreme X-Men. I'll just go back and reread the old stuff. If I'm in the mood for like Astonishing or whatever, I'll go back and read that. But I'm super glad that this is actually going to tie into Fall of X. So let me know down below if you're interested in this at all. What are your thoughts, your theories? Let me know. Last story, SDCC, Marvel reveals a brand new Punisher. Now, this one is probably going to be a more controversial kind of story, just because everything related to Punisher these days is pretty controversial in the way a lot of people overreact with Punisher related news, but let's get into it. So basically we're coming fresh off the Jason Aaron run, which I actually quite enjoyed. It was a very different type of run. It's not him kind of running around the street and shooting up crime lords. He's kind of taking on this demonic form and have all these crazy powers and stuff like that. And so we're coming off of that, and I won't get into super details for anybody who hasn't read it because I don't want to spoil it too crazy for you, but it basically takes Frank Castle off the board basically, and it plays a lot also with the Daredevil. We're on the kind of tail end of Zdarsky's run on Daredevil, and it's playing ball a lot with these two series. This one, it seems like they're going in a little bit of a different direction. We have writer David Pepose and artist Dave Wachter. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. David Pepose is a very interesting choice for Punisher, and I think it makes a lot of sense, especially with the fact that he's played over in the Punisher 2099 realm. I think he had either wrote or had something to do with the latest Savage Avengers run, which also kind of played with the 2099 stuff. And so kind of going that direction is really interesting. But the big part of this is there's going to be a new Punisher, new person in the mantle. Now, obviously, removing the 2099 aspect of it, I don't think anybody's had the the Punisher mantle other than Frank Castle. So I guess we're going to get a brand new Punisher. He's a retired SHIELD Black Ops agent named Joe Garrison. We don't know too much beyond that in terms of like how he gets into this position, why he takes the mantle, and kind of what the story is going to look like beyond that. But this is going to be out November 8th, so we're not going to have to wait too long for that one. But yeah, that's a super interesting direction for them to go into it. And I'm not mad at it, to be honest. I like David Pepose. I've read a couple of stuff. Actually, I have something this week that I pulled from him, Moon Knight City of the Dead, that he wrote that I thought was actually quite good. So I think he's a pretty solid choice for the new Punisher run. But I'm just super interested to see kind of narratively the direction that they're going. Is this going to be kind of like a return to form, something a little bit more militaristic, a little bit more underground street combat, or like what are we doing here? So yeah, I'm definitely going to be reading this. Are you interested in this at all? Are you kind of off the Punisher train? I know a lot of people are very like on and off with this kind of latest Punisher stuff, but you know, I'm down to see where it goes. Again, he's not one of my favorite heroes, but I think there's always kind of interesting stuff kind of going on in that sector of the Marvel world. So yeah, let me know what you think. So the next part, we're going to get into my poll list. So I got a nice little stack here. So let's just go one by one. We have Batman White Knight Presents Generation Joker number 3. For you guys that don't know, this is kind of like it's not quite a spin-off, because from what I understand, the story was drafted by Sean Murray himself. But Katana Collins is writing primarily this. She also wrote the Harley Quinn kind of side story from the Batman White Knight universe. And so this is kind of playing with that. And this one's pretty good. I like this series. So I'm pretty much a huge fan of anything White Knight. And so even the side stuff with like Red Hood and Mr. Freeze and all that, I'm reading all of that stuff. And so I'm into this one. I think as of right now they've solicited up to 6 issues, so we're going to get a bit more of this. And this one's interesting because it's focusing on I believe his name is Jack Napier, or the Joker in this universe, his children, him and Harley Quinn's children, and kind of them playing with their roles in relation to the kind of legacy he left behind and what the world looks like right now, and coming to love and hate those parts of her. And so you have Harley Quinn and Neo Joker kind of working together to try to get the kids back, and they're working with a hologram of the Joker. So it's a weird series, I won't lie. It's really weird, and for a second I had to look it up, and I was like, does Sean Murray even have anything to do with this? Because the White Knight universe is very interesting in the way that I think it came out of the gate like firing on all cylinders. It was incredible. And the second one with Azrael and stuff like that, super solid. I think it's like Curse of the White Knight or something like that. And then they did the little Batman Beyond one, and I liked that a lot too. But each one I've kind of liked a little less than the previous one. And so this one's kind of like a weird one where I think it's so tonally different than where it kind of kicked off with. That, like, yes, it's obvious, I think, from a visual perspective that this is obviously the same universe. But at the same time, it feels so distinct. Like Katana Collins is kind of building her own little side thing, which I can appreciate because I love this iteration of Harley Quinn. So let me know, are you reading this series? Do you have any interest in it? But I'm going to keep pulling it for sure. Next one. Oh my god, this cover. Look at this. Harley Quinn, Black, White, and Redder, number 1. This Art Germ variant. If there's anything you need to know about me, if you're not familiar with me, is that I am an Art Germ super fan. So almost anything he releases that is not an incentive variant, I'll probably pick up a copy of. But yeah, we have Harley Quinn, Black, White, and Redder. This is kind of like a compilation, different writers. I know Chip Zdarsky contributed to this. Some really good writing teams, and it's a fun issue. I'm not mad at it. $6.99 price tag, so it's a little bit on the more expensive side. However, I will make a note. This is a foil cover that I got for basically cover price, so that's really cool. Usually when you get the cardstock variants, they'll up it $1 just because of the build quality of that cover, and I believe this is one of those. But the foil can go kind of hit or miss. You have things that are like the same price as the regular cardstock variants, and then sometimes they like shoot it up. Like I think Spider-Man 300 is going to get a foil variant, and I think it's like twice the price. So thankfully they didn't hit you over the head this time with this one. And I thought it was a fun read. Again, 90% of the reason why I even got this was because of that cover. I like Harley Quinn. I'm reading her ongoing right now by Tini Howard. So like I'm a big fan of the character. But you know, these compilations are a little bit hit or miss. They do it with a lot. This is definitely akin to what they're doing with Batman Brave and the Bold right now. You get different teams of writers. They're each doing their own little thing, and the unifying force is that individual character. Some of the stories are better than others. Nothing I think is like must-read material. So if you're like a Harley Quinn fan and you're like, am I gonna miss anything related to like continuity on this? Don't even worry about it. But I think it's a nice little collector's item. Third one is one that I didn't expect to pick up this week. We have Hawk Girl #1 for $3.99. Price tag. It's not something I expected, but I am reading, or I was going to read it, but I wasn't expecting to pick it up physically. And the reason for that is that I don't have a background with Hawk Girl whatsoever. Everything I've read related to her is kind of like tangentially connected to her. She's kind of like on a teen book I'm reading or something like that. She makes an appearance. But this book, I started reading it digitally and I was like, oh no, I need this in the collection. And so I pivoted really quick and picked up a copy. So that's why I didn't get like a cool little variants. I buy a lot of variants. Unfortunately wasn't able to get a variant of this one, but I am reading everything Dawn of DC, and so far I think for the most part I've really, really liked everything they've done. Obviously, some stuff is better than others. You get your Supermans. I think Mark Waid's Shazam is like really good. And then you got things that are a little bit more middling. This is like high middle. So it's not quite as good as like what like Joshua Williamson and Jamal Campbell are doing over there on Superman. But I think it's better than some of the maybe less interesting stuff happening in Dawn of DC, like the Steelworks and stuff like that. Again, no offense to you Steelworks fans out there. But this one I think was surprisingly good. I think it was a fun take on Hawk Girl. The most interesting thing to me is the fact that they're placing her in Metropolis. Now, for anybody who's reading like Action Comics right now, you know that Metropolis is like inundated with heroes right now. So Hawk Girl is an interesting direction to kind of throw her into what I feel like is kind of an over-encumbered kind of situation over there, where there are like Superman-related characters like Superboy or like Connor, who doesn't really know his place in relation to this kind of like super full-up city. So throwing Hawk Girl over there is like really interesting, but you get some really kind of cute, intimate scenes where it kind of opens with some action, but then she's having a dinner with a friend of theirs, and I think you just get some really good conversation. It's a good kind of examination of the character and where they're at right now, and then it introduces some new characters for her to play off with. So yeah, Hawk Girl #1. I think if you are into Dawn of DC and you're willing to give more things a shot, I think that is definitely something I recommend you give a shot. But like it is a must-read material, probably not, but I think it's a lot of fun and some beautiful covers coming up. Now let's get into the Night Terror stuff. There's a bunch that came out this week, but I only got I think 3. Yeah, I only got 3 physically. And so we have Night Terrors Catwoman #1. And this is the Tula Lotte cardstock variant. Love this cover. This is actually one that I'm lucky enough to pick up in the shop. This is not something I ordered because I, again, didn't expect to get it physically. I assumed it was going to play a lot with Tinny Howard's ongoing by Catwoman right now, which I think is pretty solid. I've kind of not enjoyed anything related to that series since Joelle Jones kind of left the book. But for the most part, I think there's been some really solid contributions from the other writers. I think like Rom V did some stuff on there, and I think Tinny's doing her thing. And so when it came to Night Terrors, I was like, probably read it digitally, but I don't think I need to add it to the collection. I started reading it, and when I saw how much they were bringing in her sister, I was like, oh, this is actually taking a different direction that is tonally, I think, pretty distinct from what the ongoing's doing right now. And so I don't want to get into it too much beyond that, other than to say, like, if you're gonna read some Night Terror stuff, this might be something that might interest you, because it's, I think, a little bit different of a take than some of the others are doing. A lot of the other ones, and again, Night Terrors overall, I'm like quite a big fan of this event, but some of them, like the one coming up, Punchline, are pretty straightforward, pretty literal. Same thing with Black Adam. Hero is doing something, they fall asleep, they go through their nightmares, most literally, like the Night Terror stuff. They go through their nightmares, interact with maybe a villain or two, and then you would imagine they have some kind of conflict with them, and they're going to wake up eventually. And it doesn't really lend itself to the main story at all, and it doesn't really do anything to examine like new angles about the character. And so that's why I feel like some of these Night Terror books are not as good as quite the others. But yeah, Catwoman, I think, did her thing. So definitely recommend this one. This one is one I bought because I'm a huge fan of the character, and no, it's not just because of her design. I know a lot of people crap on Punchline fans because they're like, oh, you just like her design. No, I read Joker War, and I liked her in there, and I liked when she popped up in Batman, the main title, and Trial of Alexis K. I got the hardcover for Gotham game. I thought was really cool to see her kind of get in line with the Royal Flush game. This completely continues based on what she did previously, but they don't do too much. Like, this didn't feel like a particularly necessary addition to the Night Terrors line, to be honest with you. It seemed like kind of just one more character that they can kind of tie into things. But, you know, I feel like this one's a little bit more skippable. But this Midnight variant is gorgeous. Shout out to Dustin Nguyen. You know, he did his thing, man. This is a beautiful cover, and so I'm going to keep reading it for sure. There's only going to be 2 of them, but I don't think you're missing anything with this one. Now, this one I think is definitely worth checking out. I mean, look at this Francesco Mattina variant of Night Terrors Wonder Woman #1. I was supposed to get the Mattina variant for Batman, and I think my shop forgot to order it or something like that. So unfortunately, I ended up with just the regular cover, but I'm trying to get the Mattina variants for all the books that I can or pre-order. And this is one I'm super excited for. Again, you guys know, big Wonder Woman fan. And if there was only one complaint I had about this, and again, I love everything that I picked up this week. I'm not coming at it a negative thing, is that sometimes kind of like the Night Terrors Zatanna book, I feel like they use the character by which to have other characters participate that couldn't justify having their own book. So they didn't want to do a Night Terrors Hellblazer or Night Terrors Detective Chimp. So they kind of pushed them into her book that they weren't the most necessary to be there, to be honest. But from a narrative perspective, they were in proximity to Wonder Woman when the whole thing went down in the, I think it was like First Blood or Night Terrors #1. I forget which one it happened in. And so it makes sense that they were there. But thankfully, all the set dressings and everything in terms of kind of like the antagonist popping up were all related to Wonder Woman. And I thought it was a lot of fun. And what I even liked more than the main book was the kind of little Nubia side story there where she's kind of looking at the Well of Souls. And I won't go too much deeper beyond that. Shout out to Stephanie Phillips. I loved what she did on her previous Nubia stuff, and so it was nice to kind of go back into that world to see what she's up to and kind of bringing her into the fold. So definitely check this out if you're a big fan of Nubia or Wonder Woman. I think you can get a kick out of it. Next, Moon Knight City of the Dead. Now, this is not something that I was originally going to pick up, but this is auto-pulled from my shop because I'm subscribed to the main, Jed MacKay Moon Knight run, which for anybody who's not reading that, you are missing out. If you're into Marvel books at all, especially if you're into Moon Knight, absolutely, it's one of the best ongoings from Marvel right now. And so I didn't really pay too much close attention to this. Again, I love what David Pepose has done previously, but this wasn't like must-read material, but auto-pulled, flipped through it, looked pretty good, and I read it, and I actually quite liked it. I like Moon Knight in that kind of like psychological, paranormal kind of vibe that this book has. The art is really, really solid, and for you guys don't know, it's the Layla as Scarlet Scarab is going to make her comic first appearance, I believe, in this book as well. So even just from kind of like a collector's perspective, I think it's worth maybe checking this out and then adding it to the collection. Let me see the price. So it's a $4.99 book. So it's not the cheapest in the world, and it's not oversized or anything like that. I think you get probably like 30 something pages or something like that. But I think it's definitely worth checking out. So recommend City of the Dead. Next, this cover, another foil art germ, Tales of the Titans #1. This is, being completely honest with you guys, something I just picked up because of the art germ variant. I'm not paying super close attention to the Tales of the Titans thing because, again, it's kind of like a character analysis book. It's not really, it's like supplemental material. If anything, it's not like directly tying into what's happening in Titans or anything like that. But Starfire doesn't get a lot of love these days. She hasn't had an ongoing in years. So I was like down to check it out, and I flipped through it, and it's a nice, fun story. It's kind of an analysis of her relationship to the kind of term princess that she's kind of occupying. And, I think it's a fun, cute little story. So I highly recommend you check that out as well. All right. So we're all done with this one. Next up, Wonder Woman, War of the Gods. Now, I mean, this is a no-brainer for any Wonder Woman fans. This is another facsimile. I think the price tag was, $3.99? Oh, $4.99. So it's pretty pricey. But it's something that I've never bumped into a single issue, like original version of. So I was like, you know what, let me add it to the collection. I'm a sucker for the facsimiles. But yeah, this is a classic event. This is coming off I think this is like the tail end of George Perez's run, RIP George Perez, on Wonder Woman back, after Crisis on Infinite Earths. And so this is kind of pulling in a lot of the storylines and threads that he was kind of setting up, and also kind of pulling in wherever all the rest of the characters were, like Shazam and Zatanna and stuff like that. So yeah, absolute classic of an event. Still reads super solid. It's a little tough to follow at times for anybody who's like never read this before. If you've never read George Perez's run, this is not something I think that is accessible or you should jump into. But if you're familiar with that era and what was going on, we're talking 92, 93 DC, then I think you can get a rough idea of what's going on right there. But it's definitely something I recommend. You check out Wonder Woman and you check out like Teen Titans and Justice League at that time, and I think you can get a pretty solid event. But yeah, War of the Gods, super classic, and I think they're reprinting all 4 of them too, so that's pretty exciting. Lastly, for the main like this week's pull list, X-Men Red number 13. Al Ewing is absolutely killing it. I think one of 2 of the best series that are being put out by Marvel right now. The other one, spoiler alert, is Immortal X-Men to me. And again, I'm an X-Men biased fan, so the old that it gets me too much. But I got a McKelvey Hellfire Gala variant right here, and I don't get a ton of the Hellfire Gala variants, even though like I'm a sucker for the Hellfire Gala overall. But for the most part, like some of the design variants, their outfits look a little too crazy, or it's maybe detached from the main story. But this one was like really tied in. It's a character I love, and I was definitely willing to give it a shot. And yeah, this is just basically continuing the Genesis plotline that was kind of kicked off, and I think like Heralds of Apocalypse, and then the previous issue of X-Men Red, and it's basically her kind of looking at the circle over there in Araco, and basically being like, hey, how far from grace have you guys fallen, and challenging Storm's leadership and stuff like that. So I won't go too much beyond that for spoiler reasons, but definite must read if you're an X-Men fan, especially if you like the more galactic side of stuff. If you really like what they were doing with Araco, this is much must read material. So yeah, X-Men Red number 13 lastly. And then today, actually, I picked up 3 more books. This is just Robin 15, Robin 16, and then a variant of Robin 17. And the reason why I picked these up was because I was like logging my collection on League of Comic Geeks, and then I realized, I was like, okay, I have the first 2 trades, so that brings me up to issue 12, and then I have like 13 and 14. And then I didn't have the rest of Robin, but then I had Batman and Robin, which is the subsequent series leading up to Lazarus Planet. And I was like, wait, am I just like missing some issues? And I forgot, like I actually did drop Robin for a bit, because I just kind of lost interest on the tournament arc, and I knew, but I was into the Shadow War stuff at that time. So I like read 13 and 14 because I was like Shadow War related direct issues, but I had dropped it after the tournament arc. And then I was like, man, I'm tripping. Like, I need this full series if I'm like 3 issues away. And I read them all today, back to back, the last 3 issues, I mean. And yeah, I just loved it. And I was like, yeah, I'm tripping. So I'm definitely going to go back and reread the Robin series. I think it's one of the more endearing takes on Damian. So for anybody who hasn't read it, and from what I understand, this is, Joshua Williamson as well. So he's really doing his thing over there at DC. So yeah, that was everything that I pulled this week. Now I'm just going to go through a couple books that I also read, but I just read digitally, so I don't have any physical books. So let me pull them up on here. Okay, first off, Batman Superman World's Finest number 17. One of the best books coming out of DC right now, especially if you're into like classic stuff. Mark Waid is absolutely killing it. And it didn't come out this week, but I also want to give a shout out to World's Finest Teen Titans. That series just kicked off as well. Just as good. But man, like Dan Moore's art is just incredible. And it's kind of wrapping up the Metamorpho AI robot uprising thing storyline that they were doing previously, and I thought it was just a ton of fun. And I just think Mark Waid is like a master of writing classic DC feeling stuff. So like it feels classic, but it doesn't feel dated in a bad way. The bad way I mean like some of the dated dialogue or like the over explanations. You don't get any of that stuff, but you do get that kind of classic, disjointed, random, over the top, campy adventures that we really came to love, and kind of like Batman and Superman stories you'd get like in the 70s and 80s. Something is Killing the Children number 31. Again, huge fan of James Tynion IV. This one was a little hard for me to follow because it feels like it's been forever since I've read Something is Killing the Children. So I have to go back to 30, and then I want to reread 31 because I read 31. It was a super solid issue, but I could not remember what was happening. Like obviously they're after the main protagonist, and she's kind of had to establish this new team of people that are kind of helping her track down this person's the monster that killed this kid's parents. It's a whole thing, but it was hard for me to follow because it feels like it's been forever since I've read it. So definitely something I'm going to return back to and try to refamiliarize myself with it. Let's get into some other Night Terror stuff that came out this week. We have Night Terror's Superman #1. Love the cover. Really solid contribution to the Night Terror's release today. Just a fun analysis of the character and kind of referential to some of the other stuff that are going on in there right now. And I thought it was a lot of fun. Not too much more to go on beyond that, but I do think it plays relevant into some of the larger things that are happening in Night Terrors right now. So definitely worth checking out. Night Terror's Nightwing, I think definitely do not skip this one. Excellent art. It's very kind of like anime inspired, and it's kind of playing around with some of the guilt that Nightwing is feeling right now with some of the deaths that have gone on. And I don't want to go on too much beyond that, but definitely recommend you check out Night Terror's Nightwing. Probably my recommendation of the week right here, Blade #1. Bryan Hill absolutely murdered it. Like, from the fight choreography, the dialogue, the intensity of it. And I didn't know what to expect with this one. I had just read the Daughter of Blade series, which I thought was cute, but it didn't do too much, and it just kind of reminded me, it's like, man, I kind of want a Blade ongoing. And yeah, this basically scratches that itch. $4.99 price tag, and I think it's worth every dollar. They're absolutely killing it. I might add it to my pull list. I don't know, because I'm trying to trim my pull list, if anything, because I've only been collecting weekly physical issues, because I used to be a trade waiter for about a year and a half, 2 years, and I'm already up to like 6 short boxes, and so I'm a little nervous at this point to continue to collect at this point. Like, will I have the storage or whatever? We don't know, but I'm kind of a sucker for this series, so I might have to add this to the pull list, so for subsequent weeks you might see it there. But yeah, Blade #1, my #1 recommendation this week. Let's see if anything else came out this week. Oh yeah, so Black Panther #2, Eva Ewing is writing it, if I'm not mistaken, and yeah, she's like really doing her thing on this one, and I like it because the previous one, I think, it was a tonal difference with that run. And so yeah, Eve is definitely, I think, analyzing what it means to be a Wakandan citizen and the role that Black Panther plays in that. And it's continuing that kind of T'Challa having fallen from grace, already been stripped of his title. He's no longer king. People don't even know that Black Panther has a presence over here. And so it's continuing that kind of down and out Black Panther. So if you're not into that, that kind of Black Panther run, not him on the Avengers and King of Wakanda and all that, if you're okay with him not being positioned like that anymore, I think this is definitely one worth checking out. Not to mention, a lot of the dialogue and writing on that is just top tier. So definitely recommend Black Panther #2. Next one, going back to the X-Men world, we have New Mutants Lethal Legion #5. This is by Charlie Jane Anders, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the end of her mini. And overall, I thought this was a pretty fun mini. It's not like my favorite X-Men title, but I don't think it's like trying to do anything too serious. If anything, it's just having fun in the New Mutants world. I think she jumped on in New Mutants 31. I think she did that up until 33, and then she got this 5-issue mini. So it's kind of like an 8-9 part series. And I think she did a pretty good thing. It was really fun to see Count Nefaria take a more prominent role as a bad guy in this day and age of Krakoa. But yeah, not too much I think happens in this title that is of major consequence of Krakoa. So it's not must read material. But if you are looking for something fun, especially if you're looking for something a little bit more age accessible to younger readers, if you have kids or something like that, and you want them to get into maybe more modern Krakoa era X-Men stuff, I think Lethal Legion is a perfect place to point them to. And especially if you like Escapade, who is kind of a newer character that Charlie created. I think they popped up in Marvel Voices Pride, I think. I think it was last year or something like that. But pretty fun character. I like the power set that they can kind of swap locations with it. This book is basically almost an Escapade book. Obviously, there's lots of other characters, but this is integral to understanding that character. And I would imagine they're going to become a more and more important and relevant character, if not in the main X-Men titles, maybe in X-Men the Unlimited Infinity series that they have on the phone. I think they're going to make reappearances, so I highly recommend you check that out. Another one, Star Wars Return of the Jedi, The Rebellion #1. These are kind of a number of one-shot stories that you're getting that take place in the original trilogy, and I highly recommend you check this out, especially if you're looking to read more Star Wars, but you're not necessarily up on the Dr. Aphras and the Darth Vader and the Dark Crimson and all the different stuff that are going on, or Yoda at this point. This one, if you've seen the movies for the most part, you'll understand what's going on in this, and if you need a quick recap, it's basically Mon Mothma, there is the leader of the rebellion, there is is a attempt on her life, and so they hire 2 agents to find out who's trying to kill them and why. And well, obviously not a why, because they're hired by the Empire. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. It's not too much more beyond that, but I think it's excellently written, tone-wise. It's just, Mon Mothma is such an interesting character, and I love that she made that appearance in like Andor. So again, if you're a fan of Andor and the Rebellion and just the kind of inner workings behind the scenes stuff, I think this is must-read stuff. So yeah, that's what else I read this week. And then let's just get into the last section of the show, which is Rex for next week. So next week is going to be a heavy week. There's lots of titles that are coming out, but I tried to pick like 6 or 7 that I think are like you should definitely check out. So and there's a bunch of number 2s this week. We have Ultimate Invasion number 2, Jonathan Hickman kind of bringing back an Ultimate Universe, not the Ultimate Universe, not the previous one, but you have the maker kind of restoring this weird hodgepodge version of the 616 universe, and then what is kind of like a restored Ultimate Universe, but he's making lots of changes and edits, and it's a really weird, fun thing that I'm really psyched for, because I know that there's some Ultimate Universe related stuff coming down the line by Jonathan Hickman, and so this is kind of setting the stage for all that, and I'm excited because I don't really know where this is going, so I don't find it particularly predictable, but like obviously like Miles Morales is playing a role in there, and I don't know how much prominently he's going to be featured going forward, but I'm a Miles super fan, so like I'm down to, you bring Miles into it, I'm going to read it, and I'm just such a huge fan of what Hickman did with X-Men and Fantastic Four and New Avengers, so anything Hickman does in the Marvel Universe, I'm sold. I'm going to be there day one with Gods. Night Terrors number 2, if you're into Night Terrors and you want to know the general what's happening with the Dreamstone and all that stuff, you got to read these mainline titles. You might not read all the different character specific one, but Night Terrors, First Blood, Night Terrors 1, 2, those are the ones you have to read at the very least. And so the second one's coming out. You should probably check it out. The Incredible Hulk number 2. This was a series that I kind of had my eye on. I was a little skeptical on because I wasn't a huge fan of the previous Hulk run. This one is super solid. I love the horror and body horror. And again, it's reminiscent of what we loved about Immortal Hulk, but it's kind of a new folktale version of it. So definitely check out Immortal Hulk. One of the better things coming out of Marvel right now. We have World Tree number 4. Another Tynion book. Loved the previous 3 issue, the kind of whole undernet hypnotizing and possessing people in the real world thing. I think is a really interesting angle. It's brutally violent, so if you're not into like anything that is a little bit more on the violent side, you probably want to skip this one, but a really solid indie book right now. We have X-Men Hellfire Gala 2023 number 1. I'm a sucker for the Hellfire Galas. I think this is the 3rd annual, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously the first one I think is the one of the most consequence, but you get the debut of the new X-Men team there, and I think they're going to announce maybe and super spoiler alert here, they might announce the dissolution of the Quiet Council at this one, and obviously the fall of X is probably going to kick off, so Orcus might do some crazy stuff. So yeah, definitely check this one out. And from what I understand, the new Iron Man book might tie pretty close into it because Jerry Duggan's writing both, so keep an eye on that one as well. Not necessarily a hard rec from me, but definitely keep an eye on it. We have Superman, The Last Days of Lex Luthor number 1. This is a Mark Waid written prestige format DC book, and it's been a minute since we've had a really fun or really solid prestige format. I think the last one was like Aquaman Andromeda or something like that. I love these prestige format books. I was really into Rogues and One Bad Day, and I wish or One More Day. One Bad Day is like something else. I was really hoping that Peacemaker would have been prestige format, and it's not. So whenever there's one and it's written by like a really solid author, I am immediately going to pick it up. And this one has a really interesting plot to it where like Superman obviously has a tenuous relationship with Lex Luthor and has to like fight on his behalf to save him, and so it's really kind of calling the morality and kind of stance that Superman has taken into effect. So definitely recommend you check this one out. And then the last one, Indigo Children number 5, definitely one of the better indie books to be coming out right now. Highly recommend you check this one out. It's not quite your conventional superhero book, but it's kids with powers and forces working to keep them separated from each other, and they're all kind of gathering together to kind of free and remember back to, because they were otherwise brain kind of brainwashed and scattered around the world. And so it's really, really interesting book. Great tension. I feel like as I'm reading it, I'm like watching like an HBO show. So definitely recommend Indigo Children. And yeah, that's my Rex for this week. So yeah, the first episode of Jibreel Talks Comics. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Don't worry, it's going to get better. I know it's rough. Don't hold it too hard against me, but we're going to figure this out. Again, if you're interested in seeing any guests, or if you yourself would love to be on the show, hit me up. Let me know. I'd love to, have a quick little discussion, interview, whatever you want to call it. If you're interested in live streams, let me know. Maybe we could do this show live with questions and everything like that for anybody who's interested in doing that. Please subscribe and like down below if you enjoyed the show, and have hopefully a weekly cadence for this show. That's what I'm thinking right now. And then any kind of discussions or interviews I do would be supplementary to the weekly show. So the weekly show I'm aiming to have every Saturday or Sunday out, and then if there's any discussions, I'll put that out maybe in the midpoint of the week to kind of stagger it a little bit. So yeah, if you liked it, comment down below. Let me know your thoughts about the show, anything you think I should tweak or whatever, hit me up. But yeah, till next time, this is Jibreel from Jibreel Talks Comics. See you guys.